to another episode of Women in Focus. Our woman in focus today is a neurologist. She's looked into my head. She's going to find out how I think, why I think the way I do. Her name is Dr. Sharon Maan. Dr. Maan, you're most welcome in our program. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
When I first talked to you, we were doing a program on, brain and all that. Dr. Garg had introduced us.
Yes, yeah.
Neurology is to do with the brain. My older brother used to tell us that we only know 11% of our brain.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Well, we know more than that, I would say.
No.
Yeah, now with modern science, yeah.
Yes.
So, over the years, we've had a lot more insight into the workings of the brain, but, of course, there's a lot more to know. The more that you know, the more that you don't know, because it opens all these other questions about the brain. But it is a fascinating area for sure.
So we know a lot about our heart, we know about our, kidneys and stomach. How much do we know of the brain?
I think we know a fair amount, in terms of what makes us who we are.
Right.
What fascinates me about the brain is that, you can do a heart transplant,
Yes.
you can do a lung transplant, you can do a kidney transplant, but you can't do a brain transplant. It is the core of who we are. It is where our hopes, our dreams, our memories, our personalities, the true, who we are is
the
kind of
essence of
essence
us.
of us, exactly, of who we are as a human being, as a person, is in our brain. And the brain controls the entire body. It has links to the heart, the gut, the lungs, everything. So I've been quite fascinated in the brain in that way. But yeah, certainly there's more to know. But it is an amazing organ for sure.
So would I be okay in saying that the brain is the computer of our being?
Yes, it is our computer, our nucleus.
Yes.
It is the essence of who we are. And I mean, people say you can have a body transplant, but you can't do a brain transplant because
Right.
if you hypothesize that you were to do a brain transplant, that new person, that new body, like it's still like the brain carries the personality in a way. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
So it's at the moment,
Yes.
in today's day and age, it's not possible.
No, I don't think it'll ever be possible.
You really
no,
think so?
No.
Okay, so you said you got interested in that. So I want to take you back to your childhood. What was it that made you interested in a person's brain?
Yeah, I think going back as a child, I was quite fascinated by the body. I was quite fascinated by health and medicine. I remember being a child and looking at our family encyclopedia. We had a medical encyclopedia.
Right.
And I would, even before I could read, I would flip through the pages.
To look at the pictures.
Exactly. Look at the skeletal system, the nervous system, the muscular system, and I was quite fascinated. And as I grew older, I just became more and more curious about the human body, and it's fascinating, like what we're able to do. And over the years, I've developed an interest in the brain like anyone. It's a fascinating organ, but I would say it's more in medical school that I really sort of became quite interested in the brain. And prior to medical school, I did some Parkinson's disease research.
Okay.
And I kind of learned more about the brain in that, and it, that's where I would say I became quite interested in the area.
So when a person gets into medicine and you then specialize in a certain field, would you say that brain is one of the most difficult one, or
Yeah, it's a good question.
mystical one?
Yeah, I would say, every field in medicine is difficult in its own way.
Yeah.
And it's more, I gravitated towards neurology because I was interested in neurological diseases. And they are challenging diseases. One of the reasons why I was interested in is people who have neurological diseases have a lot of disability. For instance, not able to see, not able to talk, not able to walk. And the ability to intervene and help someone see, help someone walk, help someone talk again, to me was more gratifying than anything.
Yes.
And very emotional. And so in medical school, when I would see stroke patients and we helped them walk and talk again, to me that was just something that I wanted to spend the rest of my life doing. And to this day, it just amazes me, and it's still an emotional experience to be able to help someone in that way.
Yeah.
And so I would say, yes, neurology is difficult. The brain is very complicated. But to me, it was that interest, but also being able to help people with their disability.
Yes.
And that was gratifying and drew me to that area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You have a little tinge of different English accent, so I understand you were born outside of Canada.
That's right. Yeah, I was born in England.
Yes.
In a small town called Leamington Spa.
Yeah.
In the middle of England, in a county called Warwickshire.
Yes.
And so I grew up there. I was born and raised there, and then we came as a family in the mid '90s.
Right.
I was around 15 years old, and I have a younger brother who was 13.
Right.
And so we moved with the family to the Vancouver area. So yeah.
And why to Canada and why to Vancouver?
Yeah, so some of my mom's family had already moved.
Oh,
so
already, I see.
So my mom's family, my grandparents had already moved, and we had the option of moving to Canada, and so we looked into Canada as an option. And I remember visiting for the first time, and we were blown away by the beauty. I mean, coming from Midlands, industrial Midlands of England,
right. Yes.
coming to Vancouver, it was absolutely breathtaking. And we just kept taking pictures of the mountains and the beaches,
right.
and we were just blown away by Canada, by Vancouver in particular. And with family here,
yes.
we wanted to be close to our grandparents,
right.
and so we ended up moving as well.
So what was it? What was your dad or mom doing at that time that they were able to come here so easily?
Yeah, I guess it was challenging. It's always challenging when you're moving countries.
Yes, as immigrants,
Totally. And so my dad originally was a teacher in India. So my dad was born in Punjab, in India. And he was a math and science teacher as well as a physical education teacher.
Okay.
And then my mom was born in India but moved to England at age 16 with her family. And then my dad moved to England in his late 20s.
Right.
And so when he moved to England, he wasn't able to teach. He would have to go to school again. So he had a job working in a large factory making car parts and airplane parts. And so and then my mom mostly worked in offices, and later in England she worked in a bakery. And so they were able to find work here. Okay. I mean, it was a different area for my dad.
Right.
My mom worked for a little bit while she was here, but yeah, they were able to find work. Okay. Yeah.
And how was your coming from England and to Canada? English wasn't an issue, so you assimilated or integrated pretty easily.
Yes, I moved into grade 11. So I moved into grade 11, but I started after Thanksgiving, long weekend, I remember. Okay. So it was quite challenging, right. Because I had to catch up. I remember, in 8 classes,
right.
At the time. And, I think moving at that time is difficult because I had my friends in England. But, luckily, I moved into a school where there were wonderful friends and people who kind of, took me under their wing and became good friends. And, and then it was okay. But I would say the first year or two, it was quite challenging. I missed my friends in England. I missed my school in England. And, but, after a couple of years, it was okay. Yeah.
I want to go a little bit more into how you got into medicine. But let's take a short commercial break and come back.
Sounds good.
Dr. Maan is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Dr. Maan is our Woman in Focus today. So, Sharon is a very Indian name. Sharon is a very Western name. So, how did you get that name?
Yeah. So when I was born in England, my parents wanted to have a name that sort of, was Eastern, like Punjabi,
yes.
but Indian, and also Western.
Yes.
So they really liked the name Sharon for that reason.
Right.
And but my full name is Sharon Pal.
Okay.
So which is more of a Punjabi name, and,
right.
and so but I've shortened it over the years to Sharon. but that's how my name came about.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you were in England and you came here, missed family and friends, you must have made a lot of friends over there. Obviously, you keep in touch with them still.
Yeah.
But the life over here is, don't you think, better than the life in England?
Yeah, I would say the lifestyle here is lovely.
Yeah.
I love visiting England.
Yes.
I love visiting old friends and going to where I grew up and things like that. It's very nostalgic and a lot of memories there. But, you can't beat the lifestyle here. The lifestyle you know, the outdoors, you know, the natural beauty, the homes, you know. I remember growing up, you know, the homes in England are much smaller, the roads are smaller, the cars are smaller. So
everything
I would
is
say
small.
it is on a small scale. So
Yes.
it's such a small country with a massive population, far greater than Canada.
That's right.
But I have to say the lifestyle here is lovely, you know.
Now, when you went towards medicine, and not your mom and dad were not in medicine, but
No,
you
no.
got interested in that. So in Canada, it's very difficult to find spaces in Canadian schools to become doctors. So did you, how easy or difficult was for you?
Yeah, it was challenging. You know, when you apply to medical school, they don't just look at your grades. So they look at, you know, everything you've done, or your extracurricular kind of activities. And I think they just want to make sure you know what you're getting into, because it is challenging and there's a lot of investment. And so they just want to make sure that you really know what you're doing. You're doing it for the right reasons.
Right.
And so for me, you know, it was my dream. It wasn't something that my parents told me to do.
Right.
And so I remember being a kid telling my parents, you know, when I was 5 years old, you know, when I knew what a doctor was, what I knew when I had that concept that this is what I want to do.
Right.
And it wasn't on a whim. It was a serious decision, I remember.
Right. Yeah.
And I really, you know, gravitated to that. The ability to heal and you know, use science and medicine to heal people really resonated with me. And so I knew I was doing it over the years, obviously growing up and kind of, you know, getting more mature. I still gravitated to that. And then, you know, so I was doing it for the right reasons.
Right.
And then on top of that, you know, obviously you have to study hard and get good grades.
Right.
And that was fine. But, you know, they also look at your, you know, extracurricular, your emotional maturity, what you've done in life. And so I would say it's important to study, but it's also important to be a well-rounded person. And
I guess
so,
that makes sense.
absolutely. And so luckily I'd had a lot of experience in other areas. I volunteered for the Canadian Cancer Society for many years prior to applying to medical school. I used to put on events in the Indian community, cancer fundraisers, and then I would go to schools and teach high school students about health and prevention and cancer prevention. And then I became an instructor teaching basically volunteers about cancer, so they could volunteer with people who have cancer and be a one-to-one volunteer. And then I became part of the board of directors for the Canadian Cancer Society in my early 20s.
Wow.
And so to be able to have a voice at the table was a huge, you know, honor and a fantastic experience. And then I was very active in the Indian community because I enjoyed Indian dance, and so I was part of the Rangila Dance School group.
Oh, really? No
I was
kidding.
part of that, and so I really
With
had.
Rangi Baba.
That's right. That's right. So I was with Suki Pangalia and
Yes.
remember Lali as well, and so we would be part of that, you know, whole kind of group, and I got a chance to visit lots of communities within the Lower Mainland. You know, I remember the Ismaili Festival, all sorts of kind of things like that, and so I think kind of increases your breadth of experience. And so, you know, all those kind of experiences, doing the Parkinson's research, kind of being a well-rounded human being, and really kind of helps, I think, when you're applying for something like medicine, you know.
Neurology is to make sure that if a person can't see, obviously, if they don't have any defect with the eyes, it's just mental, then that you help them to see. After stroke, people think they can't walk, but you help them to walk again. So that particular aspect of this field is almost magical, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
So in other words, people who think they cannot see, their brain is so powerful that it makes them believe that even if their eyes are open, they can't see anything.
Yeah, so in stroke, you know, if it affects the vision, the problem is not in the eyes. It's because all the light, all the information that we see from our eyes ends up in the back part of the brain.
Yes.
And so if there's a stroke there, they you know, you can't interpret the vision, you know, the input, you know, where you interpret all the vision that you're getting through your eyes, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if they're having a stroke, you can intervene early enough to try and restore brain function.
Right.
And that way they can see again. But, you know, of course, if the damage is too great and too long, or if someone waited too long to get to hospital, you know, various factors, and unfortunately we won't be able to help them as much, and it all, you know, depends on how much recovery they have over the coming months to a year. But, you know, it is fascinating, yeah. if you can intervene fast enough and take that clot out or dissolve that clot, you can restore brain function to the point where the damage is minimal. But if that blockage stays for a long time, then most of that brain in that area dies, and then it's too late to do anything. And then the surrounding brain has to try and, you know, kind of relearn how to do that particular task. But that's obviously a much longer process.
Right. I'm going to come back and talk a little bit more about this, but let's take a short commercial break.
Sounds good.
I also found out that you're married.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So there must be a story there.
Yeah, that's right.
Dr. Sharon Maan is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Our Woman in Focus today is Dr. Sharon Maan. Neurology, do you use that when you meet people and see how they are and, you know? It's not like psychology though, is it?
It's not like psychiatry in terms of, you know, that, you know, personality disorders and things like that. But yeah, I mean, when you've done neurology, you can certainly, you know, diagnose certain conditions based on someone's walking.
Really?
So, yeah, so certain things, we will watch people walk around at a party, and you can tell that they have certain conditions based on their walk. So you can tell a lot by someone based on their walk.
So,
yeah.
So I don't want to be in a party with you where you're just looking at people. So when you met, I understand you're married, so when you met this guy that you married, good-looking guy, what was it about him that you liked?
Well, aside from the fact that he was good looking,
yes.
You know, he's a very down-to-earth guy.
Yeah.
You know, he really grounds me, and I love that about him. And he's, you know, he's a lovely person, and he's very positive.
Right.
And you know, he's a very he brings me a lot of laughter and joy.
How did you meet him?
I met him downtown in Gastown, and you know, and things just went from there. And after a year, we got married. So yeah.
So how were mom and dad about that? I mean, they knew him, or did you just bring him one day home and said, "Mom and Dad, meet"?
Yeah, well, I introduced him to my family, and he introduced me to his family. I met his family, his grandmothers, and so obviously we met each other's families first, and then eventually the families met, and then and then we got married. Yeah.
So was it a big wedding? Was it a small wedding?
It was a very small wedding because we got married during COVID.
Okay.
And so, you know, initially we thought, okay, we could wait, but you know, you never know how long it's going to go on.
Right.
And so we ended up having just a very small outdoor COVID, you know, wedding with about 12 people. So it was very, very small on the Indian wedding scale.
Yes, too small.
Very small, yeah. And so, yeah, and then we couldn't obviously go for a honeymoon or anything. So that was postponed as well. Yeah.
Now, COVID time, and you being a doctor, what does your partner do?
He works for Ferrari, so it's a very different world.
Totally.
Yeah, very, very different world. Doesn't work in healthcare at all.
No.
Yeah.
But he grounds you.
He does, yeah.
And you ground him?
I think I do. I think I think we each bring our own perspective.
Right.
You know, he thinks very, you know, mechanically, methodically. He's fantastic around the house.
Right.
You know, and I, you know, I'm not. He's into technology and all those kind of things. And so, whereas I'm kind of more interested, obviously, in human behavior, psychology, and things like that. So I think we learn from each other. Yeah.
In your field, which is a field, and I feel that it is a field which is vast, and there's so much learning and perfecting to be done. I mean, we don't even know a lot about our own human body. I mean, when you look at science fiction or Star Trek, and do you think we'll ever get one of those tricorders that you just look at it, oh, such and such thing is wrong, and press the button here and everything goes fine? Will we ever get to that state ever?
I don't think so.
No?
Anytime soon.
Not in our lifetime?
I doubt that. You know, we do have artificial intelligence like starting to help us in medicine. And so when someone has a stroke, you know, there's when they have their CT scan, it shows up on my phone.
Yeah.
You know, the scan shows up. And
Really?
then there's artificial intelligence that sort of looks at what part of the brain is gone and what is salvageable.
Wow.
But the problem is you always need a human to interpret that.
Right.
Because there can be errors in that artificial intelligence interpretation.
Right, because whatever information is given to artificial intelligence is given by humans, right?
Yeah, I mean, the scan has these automated kind of software that kind of interprets things,
Yes.
but there's potential errors. And so for that reason, you always need a human to take a look at that. And it can be off, it can be erroneous. And so for that reason, it's something that can help our job right now in my field. But you can't rely on that, obviously. You still need, humans to kind of interpret the data.
Would you ever go into surgery?
Oh yeah, so when we train in medical school and,
Right.
and in residency, we do some surgery. So in residency, we had to do 2 months of neurosurgery. So, we worked with the neurosurgeons at Vancouver General, and, we assisted in the surgery, so we would have to drill holes in the skull and sometimes help with brain resections and things like that. So we have some exposure that we had to surgery. But, for me, it was fascinating. But
Yeah.
I wasn't one of those medical students or residents that loved being in the OR all day.
Right.
And you could tell who in your medical school class wants to be a surgeon. You can tell right away.
Really?
But I kind of more enjoyed kind of the medical management of patients,
Right.
of sick patients, critically sick patients and neurologically sick patients. So
Right.
I gravitated more towards that. But certainly it was fascinating to kind of go through.
So let me ask you a silly question about the skull. You said drill hole in the skull. How thick is the skull?
I can't give you an exact measurement, but it's about this thick.
Really?
It's pretty thick.
Yeah.
But then most of the times when we would drill through the skull, it's because someone had a brain bleed underneath or a bleed right underneath the skull, a
Right.
subdural.
So you could
Yeah.
relieve
so
that.
Relieve that. Yes, you take the blood out that's
Yeah.
sitting on top of the brain.
Ah.
And so most of the time that's why they did the burr hole. Yeah, they drilled the hole.
So would the thickness of the skull depend on the size of a person?
Not so much, I would say. I mean, from my experience being in the OR, it's not that variable.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit, but not a lot. Yeah.
I have so many other questions that I want to ask you, but you know what? We only have half an hour. Would you come again if I called you?
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to be here.
All right.
Yeah.
So there'll be a lot of questions about what can the South Asian community do about their health and things like that, because we eat terrible food.
Absolutely,
No.
yeah.
And then we can have, heart and stroke issues. So those are the type of things that I want to talk to you about.
Absolutely. Be happy to.
Thank you so very much for being our Woman in Focus today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Dr. Sharon Maan has been our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back.